Hello and welcome to the latest Personal Care Global webinar. My name is Tim Probert and I am the editor of Personal Care. Today's webinar is presented by Evolved by Nature. Founded in 2013, Evolved by Nature is a US biotechnology company revolutionizing materials science by leveraging silk protein technology. The Boston-based company focuses on creating safer, biodegradable and effective alternatives to harmful chemicals. Their mission is to advance human health and environmental sustainability through cutting-edge bioengineering. The company develops activated silk, a sustainable bio-based alternative to synthetic chemicals used in personal care and other industries. This patented technology is derived from natural silk fibers and offers a customizable solution to enhance product performance while reducing environmental impact. Today's webinar is presented by Evolved by Nature CEO and co-founder, Greg Altman. An early pioneer in the study of silk protein, Greg's extensive research into silk's biocompatibility with the human body led to the creation of Serica Technologies. There, Greg developed the first FDA-approved silk-based medical device for soft tissue reconstruction. That breakthrough technology was acquired by Allergan, where Greg served as general manager and R&D VP before co-founding Evolved by Nature in 2013. Greg holds a PhD in biotechnology engineering and BS in chemistry from Tufts University. Greg's presentation is titled Beyond Claims: How Biotech Ingredients Solve Business Challenges for Personal Care Brands. Greg will explore how biotech ingredients address core business challenges, from enabling frequent use with mild formulations to driving sustainability and reducing COGS, cost of goods sold. At the end of the presentation, Greg will be very happy to answer any questions you may have, so please submit them in good time via the questions box in the GoToWebinar app. Over to you, Greg.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for your time and attention today. It's a pleasure to be here with you. Hope everyone is able to see my screen, and I appreciate the audience and opportunity to share our view on how biotechnology can help solve business problems in the personal care industry. Evolved by Nature was an idea, a concept from birth around the idea of taking nature and leveraging biotechnology as a tool to extract what has been well designed over millions of years. And we found our way into the natural ingredients business largely because of our co-founder and co-CEO, Dr. Rebecca Lacouture. So Dr. Lacouture was necessary to enable the scale up of several of the natural peptides that we have discovered from the silk cocoon. And in exchange, we promised that we would go after a first use case, which would be to create healthier, more sustainable skincare products, namely through her experience surviving ovarian cancer and going through chemotherapy, where her immune system was at a heightened degree of sensitivity. And we felt if we could access the natural silk protein, we could eliminate many of the synthetic petrochemicals found in standard moisturizers and skincare products today. Over time, we have realized that we can actually pioneer an entire platform, if not millions to billions of unique peptides from this source. And over the past 12 years, we've been successful at raising over $200 million in capital to provide the security and global scale necessary to supply our brand customers. So we're very excited to be able to share today our view and a little bit of our journey story. Today, we know that biotech ingredients are outpacing category growth. So if you look at the global skincare ingredients market, somewhere around 36 billion, it's growing at a 5.7% CAGR. If you look at the global biotech ingredients market, however, which is segmented to be around 2 billion, we actually have a CAGR of 7.8. And that tells us demand, both consumer and brand, as well as retail, for science-based ingredients is growing. However, hidden in this slide is the major confusion that many brands, consumers, CMOs are actually facing. So what actually is biotech? So in my opinion, unfortunately, we have taken a word that has been in practice for 50 to 70 years, a tool that we've been using, frankly, since the extraction of crude oil from the ground and the separation of high volatiles and hydrocarbons such as white petroleum that we've been putting on the human body for decades. And the means by which we actually extract and separate and purify natural ingredients using biotechnology tools. And we've created a noun, which really means a synthetic molecule that has been produced by DNA or sequences that don't yet truly exist in nature. And we clone them, we make them, and we basically produce proteins and other products that we think could tell a very interesting scientific story. So I would maintain, if you actually broaden the definition of biotechnology to that of which it was intended, a tool to harvest the very best of what nature has designed, either within our DNA, which then results in drugs and pharmaceuticals that help cure diseases, all the way through to some of the compounds that we've been putting on our skin as makeup and cosmetics for the past 50 some odd years. Biotech has been supporting the industry for a very, very long time. But again, we'll talk about this segment that right now has been branded a little bit, in my opinion, too narrowly, because it really relates to cloned and genetically synthesized materials. And I hope today and through this presentation, we could actually share some information with you that will expand your definition and hope to rebuild some confidence and trust in the sector. So when we look at market demand, we know that significant investments are being made in scientific-backed companies and ingredients. And this is, I think, a reprieve, especially given current market conditions, to see that science still sells so long as it's well-backed and filled with credibility and data. The investment rate, 2.5x, is much venture capital going into biotech as those focused on natural and sustainable claims. So we're finding a balance in the industry, but it's a really great sign of where market trends are going and that people and customers, consumers, retailers, and brands are really looking for evidence-based ingredients. We know that there's strong interest from consumers. 77% of consumers globally are interested in trying biotech skincare, even though they don't necessarily know what it means. 90% of Gen Z and younger millennials express bio-based beauty product interest. So again, all of the trends are in the right direction. However, the challenge is that we have narrowly defined the sector. And in many instances, we have achieved scale and growth of ingredients that the market demands and could promise advantages in sustainability, but for business and market reasons, the scale of the ingredients haven't made it. And then on the other hand, promises that we could create a boundless supply of novel peptides and signaling molecules that can involve, different cell receptors and different pathways to produce collagen and decrease inflammation. All of those promises, while theoretically true, are not really scalable. And should they actually achieve scalability, when we actually look at the sustainability contributions of those ingredients and you weigh against the energy costs of fermentation, you don't necessarily get the promises fulfilled. And so we have a lot of hope, but we also have seen us overpromise and underdeliver. And while we believe it is a fantastic tool to extract the blood of a mosquito buried in amber from millions of years ago, and perhaps use what we find in that blood to discover new diseases or what our history might have shared, it's sometimes not a good idea to use biotech to actually entertain 20 or so amusement park goers and then introduce a T-Rex in that situation such that things don't end so well, right? So the key is The value in biotech is not about the ingredient, but it is about the business gains you unlock. And when we talk about business gains, I hope in the next several slides to expand the definition of what we mean by performance. Performance economically, performance scientifically, performance from a safety perspective. So what I'd like to do is take you through just a few more trends and then give you a sense of our product development process and how we think about going about harvesting ingredients from nature. So we know that there's an increase in new inking names, and this is a really strong representation of new molecules, or at least the rate of new molecules that have never existed before that now can command a new name. So we have thousands of new innovative personal care ingredients being launched in recent years. But despite the novelty, luckily, we still have regulatory and some safety measures in place that limit the ability for a cosmetic ingredient to make structure function claims and to interact with the human body in perhaps a harmful or unsafe way. So when you look at the novelty and you break it down to what a brand or a consumer can actually receive from that brand in terms of messaging, we really start to have to narrow down the novelty and the diversity of the biology that might be contained in those ingredients and think about a novel, not a novel, but a novel way of differentiating that ingredient within a set of common claims. So we most of the time talk about hydration, brightening, anti-aging. We have a host of ingredients here that command the space. And in many ways, we actually believe biotech ingredients can differentiate themselves and provide advantages. But what we must understand in terms of broadening the definition is that at least 50% of the ingredients that you see on this screen here were actually made possible, made available through biotechnology. So again, biotechnology is not a noun. It's not a peptide. It's not a genetically engineered or synbio ingredient. Biotechnology is really more of an action. It's a verb. It's a way to isolate natural molecules from natural sources. It's a way to even take synthetic sources and create something that might actually help replace a natural molecule that we're actually damaging our ecosystem to harvest. So there's lots of opportunity here for biotech to engage and diversify itself, but we want to make sure that we don't do ourselves a discredit by narrowly branding quote unquote biotech ingredients. So when you think about what true innovation needs to accomplish, we get all excited, especially as a scientist myself, to discover, to actually create that dinosaur from a genetically engineered cell line. That's fun and all, but that does not necessarily mean that amusement park is going to generate any business gains once all of its passengers are eaten by the animal. Well, animal or reptile in that case, so excuse me, bad scientific joke. So what we have to do here is we have to think about the performance claims, and then we have to think about the business gains. That is where I feel most of biotechnology innovation actually fails. So if we get enamored with pulling apart a cellular mechanism that is involved in producing collagen, and we figure out that there's a signaling molecule that's been discovered and put in the scientific literature, and the gene associated with that signaling molecule is now in a public database, and we go ahead and we claim and we clone that gene and we make the signaling molecule, and we now could say this signaling molecule will upregulate collagen. That's fantastic. The really good news, though, is even where regulatory constraints and governances fail us, brands are becoming smart enough to know that that's just not enough, because you know what else produces collagen? Cancer cells. It's actually what creates the tumor and the shell that prevents the immune system from getting in and killing the cancer cells. So being able to say, we discovered the signaling molecule that's going to upregulate collagen in your skin, that may not be a good thing. So when we define business gains that evolve by nature, we have to think about growth, not just growth about our ingredients, but commercial growth and financial growth for our brands. And that growth can only be achieved if we deliver safety, if we deliver sustainability. So we have to think about a host of additional parameters to actually create value. So how do we think about this? Biotech ingredient companies, do they actually understand your business? That's a real question. I would say there is a plethora of biotechnology businesses out there today that do more than just the genetically engineered or syn biomolecules that are promised from AI, right? So I think in a narrowly focused definition of a biotech ingredient, I'm not so sure that we understand your business. So for example, in that signaling molecule to upregulate collagen, while that could be really interesting and it could be a beautiful claim to share with a brand to get your ingredient sold, or a brand to share with a consumer to get the formulation sold, it does not actually consider the full ramifications, because such a molecule that is just picked out of a library and produced in the United States at a minimum, there's actually a drug development pathway. There's a reason why it typically costs $100 million to $500 million to get a new drug approved in the United States. It requires safety and efficacy testing for years upon years. So us plucking a really interesting molecule that could be associated with a really interesting story and dropping it in a serum that we know has a risk of introducing that molecule into the skin and into our own human biology, that's not, in my opinion, us as an industry understanding your brand needs. So let's actually define different ways that we could think about it. So what is under the ingredient company's control? Yes, performance claims. In my opinion, everything starts and ends with performance from a value proposition, meaning if you cannot deliver performance, if you cannot outcompete, that's the gating factor. It's what is absolutely necessary to just have a start. But after that, what is under your control? It has to be performance plus. Performance plus what? In our opinion, where we are today is needing to enable a brand's creativity. Creativity in the types of formulations you can make, creativity in the way in which you can market those novel formulas, ways to differentiate yourself, ways to tell interesting stories, but also performance plus safety, which equals faster regulatory pathways, equals access to global markets, and combined, if we actually think about how the ingredient is made and where it might be supplied from with sustainability in mind, we should be able to reduce the cost of which is involved in making that ingredient, providing greater profit to our brands and lowering prices. And in lowering ingredient prices and improving our customers' profitability, theoretically delivers demand, which allows us to scale. The reason why I say theoretically is because at Evolved by Nature, we've been lucky enough to already achieve global scale, and we're passing those margins and financial performance parameters onto our customers' balance sheet and P&Ls. So we have performance claims. We then have to think about, at Evolved by Nature, them not being enough. So when we look at the bullseye of what our user needs must be, we consider every single parameter that you see here. And in a way, it was also our founding story. So when you look at the opportunity to impact business beyond that performance claim, which could be, as an example, upregulating collagen without inflammation, or improving the skin barrier without grease, we have to think about all of the different parameters that a brand and a CMO and ultimately a consumer is going to consider. So just a few examples. When you think about financial, we have rising material cost and inflation. We have tariff challenges. We have minimum order quantities from CMOs that put new startup brands at risk for making very significant financial investments in their ideas and concepts. And we then want to make sure that if they are making that investment, do we have a supply chain that's reliable, that can deliver that biotech ingredient, quote unquote, on a consistent basis? And do we have scalability? And one of the biggest challenges when we talk about synthetically engineered or genetically engineered or synbio ingredients is to actually understand that production process. So when we synthesize a peptide, as an example, what you're doing is you're making a long piece of rope from building blocks. And in most instances, 95% of the time, 99% of the time, even 99.9% of the time, you're able to add those building blocks, those amino acids in the correct order to achieve the final length of the rope. But even in that 0.1% of time, when the last amino acid is not added, or one amino acid was replaced with another, you basically introduce on the other side of this diagram safety concerns. So I think everyone has heard of sickle cell anemia. That is the change in one single amino acid in a protein that's involved in the structure of a red blood cell. So you change just one amino acid and you have a completely different molecule and you have unintended consequences. So what is the reliability, the consistency, and the scalability of an ingredient that you feel is safe? If you have a high degree of confidence in safety, then you can actually feel comfortable impacting product usage, prescribing or describing a greater use, providing your customer a better outcome. And that will drive the ability, that will drive loyalty, right? And so if we just consider how we think about this, it is all encompassing. And if you really try to piece it all together, it might seem impossible. It is not. Because what we must do is, again, stay, in my opinion, really boring and broaden the definition of biotechnology. The way in which we think about it, again, how do we harvest what nature has already designed over millions of years without changing it, but just making it more accessible? It's fun to tell really cool scientific stories. It's fun to talk about pathways and plucking different molecules out. And it's fun to tell a customer that whatever claim you want to make, I can generate an ingredient involved in that pathway, for $100,000 and you're on your way. But does the $100,000 come with the $100 million of safety testing that a medical device or a pharmaceutical would require before it's allowed to be put on humans? Or is it just a story? What do we think is more interesting? In our opinion, boring is very, very interesting. So I'd like to share a few different examples of how we feel we've achieved these user needs, but I'd also like to just share some learnings such that other ingredient companies can engage in the conversation, and the conversation between brands and ingredient companies, brands, ingredient companies, and consumers can evolve. And in a way, we can undifferentiate ourselves out of this definition of biotech ingredients, which quite honestly limits the field, it limits some upside, and it is currently driving, in our opinion, based on our engagement with customers, concerns around safety, especially in global markets. So when you consider how Evolved by Nature got started, it was the goal specifically of removing acrylates, of removing petrolatum, mineral oil, natural molecules that we use biotechnology tools to extract from crude oil, in some cases synthesized from frack gas, and ensure that those natural materials that contain contaminants in and of themselves, such as endocrine disruptors, don't make their way to skin. But if we were to replace those petrochemicals, if we were to replace even those pseudo natural materials like silicone, which are synthesized from carbon and oxygen, just with a tremendous amount of heat and CO2 released in the process, we have to make sure that we're replacing those ingredients with something that's even safer. So for us, we look to materials that have a very, very long relationship with not just the human body, but frankly, with human evolution. So when you think of two of the oldest biomaterials in the world, especially in human written record, a lot of literature for humans started by writing words down on parchment made from natural leather, which is skin. And the very first medical device ever documented in literature many thousands of years ago was the use of natural silk in the skin. And over the past 25 years, scouring the literature from hundreds of years ago, we know that natural silk implanted in the human body biodegrades. It breaks down enzymatically. So we know every single peptide that we pull out of the natural silk protein without altering it has already been in the human body, and it gives us a 1,000-year, what we will call, safety record. Now, while that's fantastic, those peptides and the silk protein itself, they're just truly not accessible. Now, the market today has figured out a way to make it accessible, but really what the market has done is figured out a way to make waste product from the textile industry accessible. So what do you do when you have silk fiber scraps from making fabric, from producing yarn? You take all of that quote unquote biomaterial, you add some acid, maybe some enzymes, and you create hydrolyzed silk. And why is that interesting? Because hydrolyzed silk on the surface of the skin, so long as it doesn't get in, it could give the skin a nice shine. It could serve as a coating. The problem is, in that solution, we actually have natural contaminants. Same type of contaminants you would have when extracting different plant extracts. They're called allergens. And so what we needed to do at Evolved by Nature was take advantage of the safety profile of the natural silk protein, but find a way to just make that actual protein soluble in water such that it could be accessible to the skin without the contaminants that come in the process of making hydrolyzed silk, namely sericin. And we had to be able to do that at a global production scale. The only way to achieve these three user needs in conjunction is to leverage biotechnology. It's to leverage the process of protein purification, but it's also to bring together some of the technologies that have been used to harvest bio-based molecules from, again, the petrochemical industry, from the fossil fuel industry, such as extraction and distillation. Processes that exist at massive scale. And if we could bring that together with our knowledge of biotechnology and biology, we can achieve accessibility at a price that delivers profit for our customers. So when you think about not just the Evolved by Nature portfolio that I'm going to share with you here, but when you think about the really core ingredients that command the majority of either the biotech industry, ingredient industry, or just in general today, the actives or bioactives, what do we really have? We have vitamin C, which came out of the medical industry. We have retinol, which started as a drug, both designed to talk about collagen promotion. We have petrolatum, we have mineral oil. We've tried to replace both of those with really great science and synthetic engineering to produce ceramides, a natural, you could think about it, wax material that sits in the tight junction between keratinocytes. And that ceramide can provide skin barrier protection, can help hydrate the skin. That's a fantastic example of biotech working for us. But in many instances, it's also an unfortunate example of companies not following a broader set of user needs. Here you take a beautiful natural material. It's a wax-based material. It's a hydrocarbon, so it's not going to solubilize itself in water. And so what do? We actually surround a natural material with silicones. And then what do we do to get the silicones to dissolve? We hit the silicone with some ethylene oxide gas to make it hydrophilic, so that way it dissolves in water. So we end up taking something that is a success from biotechnology and success from nature, a molecule that we know exists in the skin, and we surround it in petrochemicals and manufacturing processes that release toxicants into the air, into the soil, and into the water that we drink. So again, it's an example of how do you think about the broad set of user needs. If you think about hydration today, it's hyaluronic acid. Where does hyaluronic acid come from? In the skincare industry, it is the less pure forms of the hyaluronic acid that's actually manufactured for the medical industry. So in a way, it's another waste product. So when we think about the overall ingredients market, there's really only a few that stand as pillars that have the longevity of science, safety, and proof, right? And that is what the brand and the consumer is looking for. So if you take those lessons and you apply them to designing a portfolio, yes, I can pull 1,000 peptides out of a worm's ass. We can do that all day, all night, okay? But instead, why don't we take cruelty-free silk that is actually raised to reduce CO2 in challenging economic climates where it supports an agricultural and food industry. We take the cruelty-free silk that's already consumed carbon out of the air. We extract only the peptides that fill critical needs by the brand. Here, 33B alpha. We discovered a peptide within the natural silk fibroin that actually will engage with the keratinocyte, cause the keratinocyte to upregulate claudin, and in doing so, claudin will capture the natural skin's production of ceramide. So you no longer need ceramides. You now just upregulate claudin, you get a better barrier. But what do? We now have an ability to deliver this type of claim in a water-based solution. And that is unprecedented, it's differentiated, and it expands the creative palette of formulas that our CMOs and brand customers can now engage in to deliver skin barrier boosting claims with the side dose of sustainability. 27P, we discovered a peptide 5 years ago. We've been optimizing it, defining it, studying it, and we now have a version of this natural silk peptide that can upregulate collagen type 1 without the inflammation associated with retinol, TGF-beta, and other molecules that are currently being sold promising the same claim. We have a molecule called 8A alpha that we've been studying for a while. We discovered that when we apply this peptide to the skin, keratinocytes will actually differentiate, move up to the surface, and move out. And so instead of delivering molecules like hydroquinone to the skin lightening market, which supports the underpinnings of racism and prejudice, we actually just help the skin clear any excess pigment it might have produced as a result of exposure to UV, environmental factors, etc., giving a brightening look and feel to the skin. That same concept has been studied and expanded upon in KDF-beta, keratinocyte differentiation factor beta. In this particular case, we now have an opportunity to replace the use of corticosteroids, which actually degrade the skin's ability to produce collagen. Here, what we're able to do is combine the ability for keratinocytes to move up and out of the skin with the barrier boosting properties of 33B to basically heal and seal the skin at the most superficial level. And if you're able to close the skin, you're able to repel environmental toxicants and invaders, decrease inflammation, and give your skin its best chance to repair itself. Conditions like eczema, atopic dermatitis as a result of contacting allergens that are found in many plant-based skincare products, all of those things can upregulate inflammation, which opens up the skin barrier, allowing invaders in. KDF attempts to do just the opposite. And on the right, our platform of hydrogels was designed in a really, I would say, unique way. We wanted to take the very best of nature, carbohydrates, and add a performance claim to them. So in the world of hydration, we have hyaluronic acid, which is a really nice molecule, very hydrophilic. Water molecules like to bind to it. But if you take a lesson from biology and you look around the human body, the molecule designed inside the human body to truly hold water is called a proteoglycan. It's called aggrecan. And unfortunately, 40% of humans over the age of 40 have dealt and been exposed to this molecule because it hides out in the inside of your disc that basically provides the cushion in your spinal cord. So if you've ever had a herniated disc or if you've ever had back pain, likely you've exploited the disc, and some of that aggregan that holds onto water so tightly because it's a proteoglycan is causing inflammation outside of the spinal column, and you have a whole bunch of downstream ramifications. Excuse me. So what we wanted to do was take the concept of a proteoglycan, which is basically a protein or peptide backbone that can bind oil and water and synthesize it in a natural way with a natural carbohydrate, bringing the best of nature together using biotechnology to now create a novel molecule where we did just receive an INCI name called fibrin glycoside. And in this molecule, we're now not only able to hold water twice as strongly as hyaluronic acid, thereby providing our customers a 50% price discount to all of the HA they might purchase, excuse me. We're also able to promise a multifunctional ingredient whereby we could use our peptide to also bind oil and serve as an emulsifier. So not only can we deliver better hydration claims using biotechnology and taking lessons from what the human system has already designed over millions of years, we have also combined the thought process of eliminating many synthetic emulsifiers that are the backbone of everyone's formulas today. So this is how we think about our portfolio and making sure that we now can deliver unique bioactive, active, and functional claims to just about every single formula a personal care brand might consider making. And in doing so, as I was describing, we can provide better business outcomes for our customers. So in the case of barrier boosting, again, ceramides are out there. They're amazing. We love them. But you can't put a ceramide in a face wash. You can, but it really doesn't do anything. It'll just fall to the bottom. In our case, you now can formulate with a barrier boosting, non-greasy, non-hydrocarbon ingredient in any low viscosity water-based formula, such as even a micellar toner. So that's one example of how you can think about expanding the definition of biotechnology, what the body is already designed, how the skin actually works biologically, bringing them all together, making sure that we consider every single user need on this chart and delivering value to our customer. In this case, the value is if we design a peptide that can deliver barrier boosting claims in water, now we can enable the creativity of our brand's formulators. And if we're able to do that, we now give our brand customer a chance to differentiate themselves based on their own creativity and their own marketing prowess. That is how we enable better business outcomes using biotechnology. In the case of our proteoglycan, the multifunctional benefits of our activated silk hydrogels, we have the ability to outperform HA at 50% of the price with fully scaled manufacturing. If you want to then take it a step further and consider not only replacing your hydrating ingredients, but also your emulsifiers, because the product was designed with sustainability in mind, we have already created an emulsifier that's peg-free, that's palm-free, that could be used to replace carbomers, as I mentioned, acrylate-based ingredients, that's delivering sustainability and coming from an upcycled source. So that's just another example. And then in conclusion, anti-aging category, the name, it will be rebranded, but at the end of the day, what we want is to give our skin its best chance to look its healthiest and best. And in many instances, that means improving the collagen network of the dermis. As I was sharing earlier, 27P alpha, it actually upregulates the one protein that is responsible for that network, collagen type 1. In most instances in the human body, when we try to upregulate collagen, as the previous example I shared, it usually comes in the form of a mechanism to create scar quickly, because that's what the skin is really good at doing when it comes to collagen. It's producing scar. The mechanism by which we produce scar also creates inflammation, and it actually then weakens the skin barrier. Now, maybe that would help us sell more 33B alpha, but the reality is, spent a lot of time figuring out what part of the natural silk protein could be available to upregulate collagen type 1, but not induce inflammation. And we now have scientific studies that are under peer review that actually prove we upregulate collagen type 1, unlike retinol, and we do not affect the inflammatory cascade of keratinocytes in the same way that we know retinol does increase inflammation. And while you may not think retinol increases inflammation because it helps to clear acne, we all know retinol helps the outer layer of the skin basically peel off. That is one form of inflammation. And so what I'd like to do now is thank you very much and open it up to any questions. Appreciate your time and attention.
Thank you, Greg. Fantastic presentation. Thank you very much indeed. Right, so we have about 15, maybe 20 minutes for some questions. We've had a few in the question text box. If you have a question, do put it in that box on the right-hand side of your GoToWebinar app. Okay, first from Mariska van der Huyck. About the 27PA activated silk, you mentioned it promotes collagen type 1, but is that good collagen, aka not cancer stimulating collagen?
It's a brilliant question because it's all about when, where, and how much, right? Everything has to be maintained in balance. And hopefully I've communicated that thesis throughout. When we define biotechnology, it has to be a balance between performance and safety. So in terms of the good and the bad collagen, so our body naturally produces about 14 different types of collagen. I think there's been about 17 unique versions of collagen identified. Collagen type 1 is quote unquote the good type of collagen. Collagen type 3 and in many instances collagen type 4, those are collagen-based molecules that can be produced rapidly because they're branched proteins, and those collagen molecules are produced when the body is engaging in scar. So the answer is collagen type 1 is the good collagen compared to collagen type 3 and 4, which retinol and TGF-beta upregulates. So that's great. But if all we did was upregulate collagen and never turned it off, yes, we would turn into a giant gelatinous ball of jello, right? So the way in which we upregulate collagen is not by messing with the signaling molecules in that pathway. What we do instead is we give the fibroblast a really, really happy home to be itself. And what we sincerely don't do is we don't give it retinol, which tells that young and vibrant fibroblast that something is wrong. This is retinol. Retinol talks to the fibroblast. Something's wrong. Please differentiate. Please produce collagen. Please peel off the outer layer of my face, right? So what we're doing indirectly is making the fibroblast happy at home so it can do its job. And if that fibroblast stays young and happy, it does not have a chance, or we're at least not involved in the reason why it might differentiate or be communicated to produce the tumor example that I described earlier. So it's a philosophy of understanding the mechanism, and in many instances trying to stay away from it and thinking about different ways that we could attack the problem and get the very best out of what nature's already designed. In this case, the fibroblast.
Okay, good. All right, we've got lots of questions flooding in now, so we'll have to rattle through them. So another question, hyaluronic acid isn't hyaluronic acid made by fermentation nowadays? Is it really a less pure form initially made for medical purposes?
So let's talk about my definition of less pure very quickly, so that way we're really really clear. Because I do acknowledge, as a dyslexic chemist, sometimes my intent is not communicated perfectly in language. When I say less pure, when we're developing a medical device, an injectable into the knee to combat inflammation, or a volumizer in the face for aesthetic medicine, the FDA, in this case, talking about US regulations, it mandates that you have full control over your supply chain and the ingredients that you use to make the medical device. So when we're making a medical device based out of hyaluronic acid that has to go into the body, it has a molecular weight range that is really, really, really tight, like 2,000 kilodaltons, 10,000 kilodaltons, plus or minus a very small standard deviation. So what I'm talking about is in fermentation, which is the challenge of some biotech ingredients that I was alluding to. In fermentation, you can't always get it right. And so you'll get a broader range of molecular weight molecules. When that batch of HA doesn't meet specs for medical, it is plenty safe for use in skincare. But that is what I meant by less pure, meaning it has, an intended molecular weight range, which basically drives the hydration properties. So you think you're getting the hydration properties of, say, a molecule that's 2,000 kilodaltons long, but really in that mix you have molecules that's 100 kilodaltons long. And then what they don't really tell you is some of the low molecular weight HAs will actually induce inflammation. So that's what I meant by less pure. I did not mean less safe. Everything, in my opinion, coming from HA manufacturers in both the medical and skincare industries is incredibly safe. It's just more the range of molecular weights that you'll find in a cosmetic product is much broader than what you would find in a medical product.
Okay, and you said you're saying it's your peptide is a 50% discount on hyaluronic acid.
That's exactly right. So our molecule is produced at price parity, and at the lower dose ranges used in almost all cosmetic formulas, we deliver, if not 2 times, in some instances even 3 times, the hydration power of hyaluronic acid. So you only need to use half as much of our activated silk hydrogel, which is a proteoglycan, then hydrogel, then hyaluronic acid, which is a carbohydrate, but it's not necessarily as powerful of a molecule as a proteoglycan. So that's exactly right. We get to basically save our brands 50% of their ingredient cost if they're using hyaluronic acid today, and with the upside of multifunction.
Okay. Okay, thank you for clarifying that. Yeah. So, I had lots of questions in from Sherry Backman. Does she, maybe she works for Evolved by Nature. Maybe I'm not sure. First of all, a wonderful, comprehensive, informative webinar, really well delivered. Thank you. She asked, her question is, what platforms still don't sell products containing your biotech materials? She says she formulates for indie brands, would like to use your materials and needs to be aware of sales platform restrictions. What attempts are being made to change those restrictions? Sherry asks.
What I would say is please send me an email at greg.altman@evolvedbynature.com, and we could connect you into our sales network worldwide and make sure that our ingredients are accessible to you. The really good news, Sherry, is it's a water-based peptide that is based on performance, and so it'll look like and feel like, except for the hydrogel, formulating with water. And that is what we're trying to actually do to deliver that business performance we talked about, which is enable your creativity so you can enable your customers' range of products, enable ranges of sensoriality, and not hinder the look, touch, or feel of the ingredient, of the formula itself. So please send me an email. I'd be happy to connect you in.
Sherry also asked, thank you, Greg. Sherry also asked, have you done any hair care studies? Shampoo, conditioner, and so on.
Yes, and we're actually launching the hydrogel P1 alpha and P1 beta in hair care at Suppliers Day in New York in the next 2 weeks. So one of the really exciting things about a proteoglycan, as I mentioned, is that it can bind water, but it could also bind oil. And some of the unique properties are not just the touch or the shine or the feel of hair, which hydrolyzed silk can do, but we have a unique way of actually penetrating hair, bonding with keratin, and holding both oil and water in the hair. In doing so, you actually deliver temperature protection to the hair. So the stylist can deliver more heat without damaging the hair. And what is most exciting, and I alluded to it in the 33B discussion, both the hydrogel and the 33B peptide can actually be delivered to the skin and hair in a surfactant, in a soap. In fact, the presence of a surfactant helps to stabilize the peptide and make sure the peptide is in its activated form such that it can bond and penetrate hair. So appreciate that question, opportunity to discuss the opportunities there.
Okay, good. Got lots more questions. Okay, I've got one from Judy Beerling, who many in the industry will know. Hi, Judy. I hope you're doing well. Judy asks, can you formulate a totally clear water-based product? What did you mean by easiest formulating with 2% water on the chart?
As long as your preservative system doesn't affect the opacity or haptics of the formula, our ingredient will look like, feel like, and have the viscosity of water. That is one of the major benefits that we deliver in our platform. But it was also, as I mentioned earlier, one of the most critical user needs. When we were going after, at the very beginning, skin barrier formulas that could be used on the most sensitive of skin, the concept was, how do we get rid of, in some cases, the what I'll call barrier-like materials like silicone and petrolatum. So yes, you can now deliver, say, the power of Vaseline in a sprayable water-based toner. And many of our customers are doing just that, which is really exciting to see.
Awesome, awesome. Okay, thank you. Next question from Patricia Palido. Have any white papers on any of these ingredients been published? And if so, what publication?
So we just received, it's very exciting news, we just received reviewer comments on both our 33B and 27P peer-reviewed publications. So those will be published shortly, and we'll announce that as soon as we get the final edits and confirmation. So we're thrilled about that, and we have a paper in publication, in preparation for submission to a peer-reviewed journal on KDF beta. We have versions of white papers of all of the ingredients and the science available. So please, again, you could reach out via our website or email me directly, and I'd be happy to put the science in your hands, which I do want to credit Dr. Marukian, someone that is near and dear to our hearts and has been leading our technology and discovery platform for the past several years, and has made just incredible strides, specifically in our hope with a sustainable ingredient and combating some areas of atopic dermatitis that today, we really only can treat by messing with our immune system and our inflammatory processes. So very excited about that, and I'd love to share the science, quite honestly, as you could tell me not shutting up right now, with anyone that is listening.
Yeah, well, we've got a few questions about essentially inquiries wanting to know the price, specific questions related to their individual activities. Could you remind us your email address again if they wanted to get in touch with any sales inquiries?
Sure. I'm not sure if my screen is sharing again, but it's
Yeah, I'll see that.
greg.altman@evolvedbynature.com, but you can also just come to evolvedbynature.com and easily find the description of our ingredients. So really appreciate the interest, but please feel free to email me directly as well. As I said, I love to engage with anyone interested in learning the science and more about the ingredients. But to answer your question, Tim, and those attending, one of the user needs within that financial benefit is we deliver either price parity to the market leading molecule or cost savings. So for example, compared to hyaluronic acid and many of the barrier molecules like ceramides, we're actually in a position to save our brands money. And that is key, right? Delivering innovation and profit to our customers is absolutely key. So the way in which we always think about it is on a dose basis. We price it by the kilogram, and given the dose, given our price of the kilogram, we come in at very reasonable costs for our customers, such that we can enable, frankly, sustainability and other trends to take hold and survive.
Okay. Are you happy to take questions for another 5 minutes or so, Greg? Or do you have to be somewhere else?
Please. No, I have a
Okay,
board.
fine.
I have a board meeting in an hour, so this is
Fine.
much more fun.
Okay. Okay, good. Let's continue. Well, I'm not sure if this is sensitive or not, but there's been a question about your minimum order quantity. Would you rather, if you'd rather just people emailed you with these sorts of inquiries, or if you're happy to
Feel free to email, but we'll engage you with samples so you can support your formulation. We want to really empower the use of our ingredients in formulation development, and know that many upstarts and truly innovators, right? They're starting off with MOQs of maybe 5,000 products max, and we want to enable that innovation. And like I said, we've been lucky enough to have a co-founder much smarter than me that starting 13 years ago figured out how to scale our processes and has developed an incredible operations, regulatory, quality, and process engineering team, such that we're at scale today. And what that means is we can service the smallest MOQs to the largest without having to challenge our customers. We want to enable use, we want to enable creativity. So I'm sure we have the product size for pretty much every brand and startup and formulator and creator in the marketplace today.
Okay, good. Question from Mindy Goldstein. Since silk is from silkworm, how do you get around the animal label?
So in many instances, let me just share this. Silk is an externally expressed protein from an animal. So we are silk, honey, and milk, right? That's the classification that we're in. How do we get around some of the concerns around cruelty that is a process involved in the textile area? That is a really great question, and it is dealt with our commitment by going to the farms themselves that actually rear the cocoon for sustainability and sustenance purposes and not for the textile industry. So it is animal derived. However, it's unlike, say, natural collagen. It's not a protein produced inside a bioorganism. So the concern around, say, viruses that you might have, like with a collagen protein, that does not exist. Like it's actually, in fact, even safer than milk, right? It's much more like what you would see from honey.
Okay, very good. Well, unfortunately, that's all we've got time for. But thank you very much indeed, Greg. That was a tremendous presentation, and just thank you so much for being so willing to answer the questions. Just remains for me to say that if anybody's tuned in late, the recording will be sent to everybody who registered, and the recording will also be made available on the Personal Care Magazine website very shortly. So thank you very much again. Thank you, Greg.
Everyone, and Tim, thank you so much for your time and attention, and look forward to engaging anyone that would care to engage me. Very much appreciated.
Awesome.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
Bye,
Bye.
everyone.
Bye.
Here.
Ciao.